Gabriela Usakova, the legendary Athens whore, renowned not only for her special services to the male population, but also for her charitable work. She stated that she was born to become a prostitute. She had her first sexual experience at 5 years of age, and as a child, killed her little brother out of jealousy. She served the oldest profession in her own way until she was 75 years old, when she was ungloriously murdered. A murder that remains unsolved to this day. Gabriela Usakova was born in May 1916 and was of a Russian aristocratic family, as she claimed. When Lenin and the Bolsheviks seized power, and due to the then desperate economic situation in the country, her family was among those forced to emigrate. Gabriela was 5 years old when she boarded a ship to Piraeus with her mother and her younger brother, who was still an infant. As she states in her autobiography, her parents had quarrelled and her father had never been with them again. Dad had a fight with Mum badly. He wanted to go to Trabzon and Mum to Romania. That's when he took his wallet and abandoned us. Later, he died in America in 1962. She did not see him again. This trip to Greece was to be decisive for the youngster, since that's when two of the most characteristic and important events of her life occurred: her first sexual experience and the murder of her brother, which she committed. Most children at this age experience jealousy and competition with their younger siblings, which brings unpleasant conflicts, but retreats and balances with time. Gabriela's jealousy for her younger brother seems to have reached a pathological point of obsession. She said that she loved him very much, that she would worry about being beautiful and that her mother would dote on him and not just her. The kid was bothering me. At the time, I didn't love him at all. So there came a moment on that journey that while they were on deck, her mother left her for a while to watch the baby in the cart. Then, as she mentions in her autobiography, she immediately stuck in her mind the thought of doing him harm. "What are you waiting for? Mum will come back," she says a voice told her, and by grabbing the cart, I pushed it with all my strength. Some banana peel was destined for that child. The cart leaned, the kid crashed on deck. Crying upset the people on board. I was crying too. How beautiful it was. But beauty must die, the voice inside me said. Unfortunately, the child died and I didn't get blamed because of the banana peel. They mistook it for an accident, so I was left alone with my mum. I ate double chocolates, but for hours I saw the baby in his coffin and felt responsible. During their short stay in Constantinople, where her unfortunate brother was buried, Gabriela gained her first experience with paid love, or as one might say otherwise, her first sexual abuse, which she did not perceive at all. She happened to see in front of her a young Turk, a nice child who she found attractive, as she said, despite her young age. At the same time, she dropped a £5 note she was holding, and they talked about how she could get it. The Turk, without any consideration for the child, asked her to satisfy him sexually in order to get the £5 back, and that's exactly what happened. The fact that she received a fee to do the particular act seems to have subconsciously given her the message that sex is associated with money. This was the only way she lived her whole life. Characteristic is Gabriela's phrase that became a subtitle of her autobiography: "I became a sex worker because I was born that way." And indeed, her whole youth trajectory shows exactly that. In 1929, the 13-year-old Gabriela and her mother arrived in the Greek capital. Her mother remarried, and their new family had a fairly large financial comfort. Gabriela studied at the French Greek School of St. Joseph, learned piano, dance, and spoke 5 languages. For a time, she worked as a French teacher, but soon abandoned this path and slowly entered the world of erotic art. She first worked in a cabaret and toured Greece as a dancer. Soon, she ended up in prostitution. With money she managed to raise, she bought and built a house in Exarchia, where she would now work as a prostitute. The neoclassical house in Markos Evgenikos 14 became one of the most popular and frequented addresses of Athens. Gabriela accepted as her clients all men of all ages and social classes, from ordinary middle class to prominent persons, politicians to artists. She did not discriminate, but charged everyone differently according to his situation and abilities, so as to be fair to all. Her particular characteristic as a prostitute was that she enjoyed giving men affection, didn't speak badly of them, didn't irony them, and never rushed with them. She even had a friendly relationship with them. They told her about their personal problems, and they trusted her. The actions of Gabriela during the period of the German occupation is also well known. She received clients from soldiers to commanders, Germans with many of whom she had developed close relations, and is reported to have frequently managed to obtain information which she transferred to members of the resistance. She earned her money by buying food she would leave at the doors of her neighbours to help them. For the services she offered at the time, she later received an honorary distinction at the Presidential Palace, and thus became the first and only prostitute in Greece who ever passed its doors. Apart from the period of the occupation, Gabriela was generally known for her sensitivity to other people and her charitable work. She helped with her fortune to study children from poor families, paid the costs of hospitalization for her needy neighbours, and generally helped anyone she knew was in need. These elements were the reason that Gabriela was particularly dear to all who knew her, either through her profession or simply as their generous neighbour. Gabriela Usakova never stopped working as a prostitute, instead supported and loved for various reasons the work she had chosen, for what she offered and for what she herself apparently took from it. I have no complaints whatsoever, neither from society nor from anyone. How can I explain it? From a young age, I wanted the man, the dragonfly. As a woman, she was highly educated from a young age, deeply religious, independent, and worshipped art. She frequented the theatre and loved music very much. Her appearance was always thoughtful until the last detail, and when she was walking down the street, one could not guess her profession if we were not already aware of her. She always worked alone, without any other girls or pimps, and despite her sensitivities, never allowed herself to fall in love with any man of her clients, or in general. In the 60s, Gabriela became the first subscriber of HOOKER to use an answering machine. Markos Evgenikos 14, next to the column of the PPC, the door with the light, "Knock and I will open," said the famous recorded message, which many at the time knew secretly or openly. In 1981, she published an autobiography entitled Gabriela, My Life, I Became a Sex Worker Because I Was Born Like That, where she gladly chronicles the course of her particular life. In 1988, the myth of the pleasure of Athens inspired the music composer Kostas Kaldaras to write for her his song Gabriela, performed by Kostas Katsimichalis. On the 25th of August 1991, and at the age of 75, Gabriela was found murdered in one of her own rooms. In the evening, strangers had come to her house, probably as clients, and as it seems motivated by robbery, they muscled her, tied her up, and ended up strangling her. The elderly woman carried visible injuries to her face and neck that indicated the way her life was taken away. Her home was found to be trashed, but no one knows what the perpetrators might have taken from it, since the legendary prostitute always lived alone and generally did not talk to anyone about what she had and what she did not have. What is certain though is that the property she left behind was huge, with millions of drachmas deposited in banks and dozens of properties, as the reports of the time mentioned. Objectively, Gabriela, in addition to any other capacity, was an elderly woman and alone who always had her door open to any passerby and had a reputation as rich. So it was an easy target for would-be bandits and criminals, and at the time was no longer when people were sleeping through open doors. Her neighbours and all those who knew her talked about her in the best words and asked for her murder to be solved, since they could not imagine who might want to harm this woman. Some described her as a holy hooker because of her benevolent character and the assistance she offered to her fellow human beings. There was a view that those who killed her were foreigners, since Greeks, neighbours, known and unknown, respected her as a human and loved her. Indeed, the news of her death followed a pervasive sadness in Greek public opinion, while reports about her life and her inglorious end filled pages and pages of newspapers for years. However, despite investigations by the police, the perpetrators of the brutal murder of the famous Gabriela were never found, and her case remains unsolved to this day. More than a few, however, have questioned the robbery theory and have argued today that her murder might have had other motives. One might, they say, have wanted to somehow shut her mouth, although her confidentiality towards her clients was never questioned. Perhaps the alternative theories are the reason for her murder and explain the fact that the killer or killers were never caught.